This week is going to be one of my favorite topics that we ever cover. This is investing in whiskey. I have some fantastic guests with me this week. And for this purposes of this panel, I am going to have to give the following disclaimer. This panel and its contents are for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute investment advice. Before making any financial decisions, you should consult the services of a financial investment professional. And without further ado, I will introduce the topic of investing in whiskey. This is going to be an extremely unique topic. I have two incredibly wise individuals joining me here today. The first being an amazing woman from the Bourbon Women Association in Maggie Kimberl. Maggie has a very, very incredible history here, especially as a writer. Maggie is the president of the Bourbon Women Association, as well as the content editor of American Whiskey Magazine. She's a freelance spirits journalist focusing on whiskey culture in the U.S., though she considers herself to be geographically blessed to live in the epicenter of the bourbon world in Louisville, Kentucky. You can follow her on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and check her blog out. She is at LouGirl502, if I am correct there, Maggie.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Great to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So much fun. Oh my gosh. Before I start getting into it with you, I am going to introduce our next host, the amazing Robin Coupar. So Robin, I know we know each other from the Campari world. You are one of the most revered people in our industry on the Scotch whiskey side, that is for sure. Robin, a native of Edinburgh, is a leading whiskey expert who has dedicated more than 29 years to the industry. Robin is the global whiskey advocate for Campari Group's whiskey portfolio, including Glen Grant, Wild Turkey, and Russell's Reserve, to say the least. Oh, as well as 40 Creek. I didn't know that. In 2016, you were inducted into the Keepers of the Quake. Congratulations. At Campari, you have performed several marketing roles in the whiskey category, and you have a focus on innovations and developing new liquid expressions, including several of the collectible whiskeys that you guys now feature. He is also a judge in the 2020 San Francisco World Spirits Competition alongside myself. So this is great to actually finally chat with you once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nate. It's good to be here.
This is amazing to have you guys on here. This is going to be a fun panel. Investing in whiskey, this is such an open topic. What is going on in the world today is absolutely insane. Bottles that I know Maggie has drank and literally thought, oh, that was a good whiskey, are now in the thousands of dollars on a daily basis. Obviously, my forte is investing in whiskey. As much as I love to drink it, I love to collect it. I know a lot of people don't like me for that, but that is A-okay. Some people buy real estate, and I kind of buy whiskey. That's sort of how I got into this thing. It all started with someone coming in and saying, they saw a bottle I had for $100, and they were like, I love that bottle. I'll give you $1,200 for it. And this was about 9 years ago, and I thought, well, yeah, absolutely, I would like to give that to you. So I did, but what are you selling it for? And, to give a little context to this topic, the 1926 Macallan 60-year, the first one sold for $1.4 million, the second one sold for $1.8 million, and the most recent one sold for $1.1 million US dollars. In Japan, obviously very revered whiskeys. While they are on the lesser value, they're still extremely high. The Yamazaki 50, which was retailing for $4,800 in 2005, actually winds up being at around 500,000 US right now. The Yamazaki 55, which they knew was going to be a much more limited edition to 100 in honor of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, retailed for 32,700 and is now going for around 800,000 or 900,000. So I pose this question to you guys: what is going on here? Like, honestly, this is crazy.
So
Maggie, yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot to kind of unpack here, right? Because there are a lot of forces at work. There's we discussed the other day about the psychology of collecting. And, there are a lot of different things at work. The nostalgia aspect of things, and also one of the things that we talked about also the other day was, social currency. I think Robin brought this up. There's something to having something that nobody else has or having something special. And you see this a lot with whiskey enthusiasts, right? Because when people come over to my house, I say, "Oh, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you because I want to kind of broaden their horizons. And
Yes.
when likewise when I go to somebody else's house, they say, "Oh, have you ever had this?" And it really doesn't even have to be anything really super expensive. One of my neighbors brought over a bottle of JTS Brown the other day, and it was an $8 bottle. And I was like, I've only seen the bonded. I've never seen this 80 proof before. So, there's that social currency of,
Mhm.
have you tried this? This may be something that you haven't had before, or maybe don't have access to.
Well, I think you raise a great point there. There's two aspects of it. One, there's the guy that is collecting for the sake of collecting,
Hmm.
and two, I mean, and this might sound crazy. I think that there's the aspect of generosity, but there's both ego involved in both sides. I think
Sure.
there's ego in owning the bottle and ego in being able to share that bottle, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and I don't mean that in a negative way. I think you're exactly right. The social currency aspect here is something that has clearly driven this to where it is right now.
Your question was what's driving this kind of investing in whiskey idea, and it's working within the industry. It's quite interesting, from my perspective. But I think in general, it's rarity. The industry's latched onto this idea of rarity, something that will never be repeated. Once it's gone forever. It's a great motivator to have something that nobody else has, perhaps. And that gives some people, that social currency, I think, that opportunity to sort of tell that story, and drive a little bit of that sort of connection, I think. So I think that's a very powerful driver behind it. But also, now the economics, the whiskey nomics of it all now. Like you
Yes.
mentioned, I mean, this great appreciation in value. I mean, to give you another example, you talked about Maple Hill. I mean, we recently launched a 13 years old Russell's Reserve,
Mm.
priced at a very reasonable $70, $69.99 at retail, which was only, a few dollars above the price of the 10 years old and only 3 years older. And yet I saw it today in my local liquor store for $550 a bottle. And I know
What?
that that's quite a cheap price because we've seen it about 3 times, 4 times that price already. And it was only launched,
Wowee.
a few months ago. So I think there are people are there. I mean, there's lots of different motivations, of course, but I think the whiskinomics, I think people see an opportunity to, make a little bit of money, sell it on, make that profit perhaps in the secondary market. And I think that's driving a lot of this as well.
And I love
I
that term, whiskey-nomics.
yeah.
Whiskinomic. I didn't make that up, Maggie. I've read that in a few places.
Oh my God. I mean, you say that, and I'm wondering if I should be mad, or if or we should be mad, or if that's just the way of the world nowadays. You go into a store in New York, and Pappy is 4,000 on a shelf, all day long, and they get it all day long, right? Are they just taking advantage of a market that just doesn't really care, or what do you think? I mean,
Well,
I
again, it kind of goes back to that psychology, right? Because, a $4,000 pappy, not only is that out of reach for me, from a fiscal standpoint, but
Mhm.
also, I could spend that money on a lot of other things, not the least of which is, I can get eight and $10 bottles of whiskey all day long in Kentucky that are very nice.
Yeah.
So it,
Absolutely.
it has a lot to do with, again, that ego and the social currency and being able to have those bragging rights and say, I got this, really rare, expensive bottle,
Mhm.
and there's a lot to that, and I don't know that I necessarily fault the stores for jacking up the prices because I think a lot of them saw what has happened with the secondary market and said, why should we be selling things at retail when somebody's going to just walk in here and walk out,
Mhm.
put it on the secondary market and, make $8,000 on it. So, but it does tend to sour people who are into whiskey for the love of whiskey, right? So, there are the people who see the economic opportunities, and then there are the people who are in it because they just really love this industry. They love this product. They love the history, the story,
Mhm.
the camaraderie and all that kind of stuff. And, those people would be really soured by something like that.
What I noticed is that it's not the distillery charging these prices. The distillery, I don't know. I can't imagine how the distillers feel and the people creating this actually feel,
They're
because
not happy about it,
that's the thing.
by
Like,
and large.
right. And, you see that, and I'm thinking to myself, a Yamazaki 18, which was, $90 on a shelf 9 years ago, is arguably $1,300 right now,
Sure.
on a good day. And from what I've seen over the last year, as much as Japanese and Scotch are extremely high end, bourbon has that room to grow.
Well, I think you mentioned earlier there, Nate, that a lot of the distilleries aren't doing that. They're not, inflating the prices. I mean, I think some of them are. I think some of them are.
Right.
They realized this a while ago, maybe, back in, I think maybe 20 years, possibly 15 years ago, they started to realize that there was a market for limited, rare, fine and rare, collectible malt whiskies. But, I think you're right. I think there is room for bourbon to grow. And, some of the bourbons that are being produced these days are absolutely fantastic. And the innovation and the thinking and the craftsmanship behind them will stand bourbon in good stead. But I take another view about, that we have, these collectible whiskies. And I know that's the topic of today's discussion. But, distilleries will spend most of their time really trying to, perfect the spirit that they're making. There's a danger that with the example of the Russell's Reserve and the Maple Hills, that we can lose our core consumers because they keep seeing the price go up and up and up and up and up. And suddenly it's like, I'm not going to drink that brand anymore. I'm going to go somewhere else. I've had enough.
We have seen a fair amount of that in Kentucky bourbon. I think it's interesting. You're coming at this more from a malt whiskey perspective, even though you do work with some Kentucky, you do work with Wild Turkey. It's interesting in Kentucky because, for many, many decades, bourbon was barely scraping by. And that's why you have so many offerings that are in that $8, $10, $12, $15 range, because bourbon's price had to be kept artificially low to compete with unaged spirits, vodka being, the main culprit there for many decades. And so, as this bourbon boom has gone on, we've seen, some producers have, kind of inched up that price point. But we did see, a couple of rare offerings where they doubled the price point overnight, and then they received blowback from that. And for most consumers, they don't understand the intricacies of the market forces behind those changes. They just know, I used to be able to buy this for $15, and now I can't even get it if I wanted to. And if I did, it would be, $115. So, there is that definite risk of alienating the consumer base.
So let me touch up on a couple of things that have happened recently. The NFT game has become a part of spirits. Glenfiddich obviously selling 18 bottles at 46-year-old bottles, 15 of them at $18,000 each. That's right. 15 bottles of 46 for $18,000 each. And they are tied to an NFT house in Singapore. And then the next thing that happened was Macallan sold for $2.3 million for an entire cask plus an NFT. What do you see here going on?